Hello, we are live with the Juju Show, episode number 16. Back from London, back in the home offices, and recovering from the holiday weekend. I hope all my Canadians had a good Canada Day, and all my U.S. folks enjoyed their 4th and got their firework on. This week we've got with us Antonio. How are you? How was your 4th?
Doing well. Only mild fires around here. So
only mild fireworks. You didn't
yeah.
get out the big guns.
No, just mild fires.
Oh, it's fires. You've got wildfires out your way.
Yeah,
that time of the year.
So
huh?
everyone survived. Things was good. So thanks.
All right. Well, that's good. All right. And Kevin, how you doing, man?
Good.
You have a good time?
Nothing.
All your fingers?
No firework disasters on my end.
I like to go where they have the fireworks where they shoot them off across a lake. Big professional show. I just sit back, nice lawn chair and ooh and ah. Go purdy. All right. But we've got 2 weeks of Juju news to catch up on because it's been partly away and everything. So let's get started. First up, I wanted to highlight Adam's continued work on running the Juju documentation sprints. They had their second one last Friday before we all went away on our little lovely weekends. Filed some new issues. They focused on the reactive and charm writing bit, which is really good because I think we need definitely need some better help there. Filed some issues with some things that need to be clarified in the docs or some docs added. Saw a couple of pull requests go by. So check the link in the show notes for the list of issues and things. And obviously, like we keep saying, is if maybe you're not someone who's going to hack on the reactive framework itself, or hack on the code, go through the code reviews, write the tests and all that. Sometimes just helping to write the documentation on how it works and some of the known issues, it's just as important. Help those next people that come along behind you. And so I encourage everyone to participate, to jump in, and to help build that out. Their third one, I'm going to take a wild guess, is going to be next Friday. So I look forward to seeing you all writing some docs, filing some bugs then. I know I will be there this time. I promise this time. I was away one time, and then this weekend I had to take off before they had their sprint. So that's it. The next one, I will be there. Did you guys participate at all?
I didn't make the last one. I was there two sprints.
You were on the first one. All right. So you got me. You got me by one so far.
I'll be with you.
All righty. Cool, man. All right. So next up, is it possible to return management to Juju after manual provision of a machine? And this was kind of an interesting question on the mailing list. Someone was trying to work on a charm, and the hooks went kind of crazy, and they didn't know what to do. And it sounds like in the thread, what they ended up doing was manually running Juju add machine, and then they did some stuff on it to prepare it or whatnot so that things should work. But they wanted to know, how do I bring this back so that Juju knows about it? And the answer that came back was, well, you can just deploy with a constraint -- to the machine number. So when you Juju add machine, it does just give you a blank empty machine that comes up with whatever constraints you give it. But once that machine's known in Juju, you can always use it as a target for some future work, whether it be deploying things or other commands. You can Juju SSH to that machine and all that. So I kind of wanted to highlight, because I know that oftentimes folks, when they're testing or playing around with things, often manually provision the machines and might do stuff like, I want to test, will this work on a new Ubuntu series? There's a new release coming. How will this work out? You can actually add the machine and then try to deploy a charm onto that machine, for instance. Or if you want to try to test how this will perform, maybe you want to deploy the same thing. I don't know, I guess you could use it for performance testing, all kinds of, there's a lot of reasons I know folks use to manually create the machine first and then leverage it for future Juju use down the road. So, something to keep an eye on. That was an interesting thread. And, go follow the link in the show notes, see what's there, and if it gives you any new ideas on how to use things going forward. Cool. New release of python-libjuju. Yay. This is more goodies coming from the library that you can use to talk to Juju. Some of the highlights here is it implements an SCP functionality. So if you want to script copying a file to something in the Juju model, you can use the library to libjuju to do that now. It has some additional metadata, such as the public address. So often if you want to script against something, you want to know what its public address is so that you can then script something like going to a web URL and curling something or whatnot. And then the third one that I thought was really good is getting and setting configuration on a model. So oftentimes you script testing scenarios, you may instead script it to use a different deb repo to pull packages from, or you may script something that needs a proxy configuration set on the model. And so those are some handy additions to the library to have to help enable folks to get the most out of Juju and their scripting needs. So make sure to upgrade and check that out. Bigtop release, what's this?
Yeah, so this one's mine. Apache Bigtop is a pretty core piece of our big data strategy for charming big data solutions with Juju. They are about to release their 1.2.1 release. It has already gone through quite a few iterations and should be up for vote. Be next week at the latest. A couple of things that are of note here. First of all, is just the fact that there is a point release. Follow the Bigtop release cycle may have remembered that the last major releases was 14 months with no point release in between. So the community there is very much aware of that being a really long time. And the 1.2 release was made in April, and this will be the first point release on top of that, just a couple of months down the road. So really excited to, number one, have a more frequent or the core Bigtop. Why that's important to us, a couple of things that we're leveraging now that made it into this release. One is this concept of Spark standalone. So you don't always have to deploy Hadoop if you want just a Spark cluster, right? So that was a pretty big ask of the community at large, and that's landed. Another few fixes for PowerPC and some other architectures are all good. And then from our perspective, all of our charms are now GPU enabled. That is, if you say so, any deployed on GPU enabled hardware, like I forget the model numbers, but like a P2 on Amazon or a NC6, if you deploy to those, you can automatically turn on the CUDA flag as those instances have NVIDIA GPU support. So we picked that up by including the NVIDIA layer written by, I think Sam Cozenet wrote that layer. Really pretty simple to enable, and happy to land that in this point release.
Cool. So so you said that works in Amazon, in GCE with their correct, and then could you do this with MAS if you had the hardware yourself?
You know, I don't know right now what it does. I think an LSPCI to detect whether it's an if it has NVIDIA hardware on the unit. So I don't know what that would look like on a MAS installed unit, and it will go out and grab the NVIDIA components that are necessary, libraries and things like that to operation. But for sure, it does work across.
Yeah, I mean, an LSPCI running on your bare metal machine should return back that it has the proper hardware and stuff.
Yeah, just I'm not 100% on what string it's grepping for to know that, but easy enough to find out. I'll look into that. It's a good curiosity.
If your hardware supports it, if the OS can detect it, the charms will pick it up.
Yeah, it'd be cool to get some folks to test it out. Sounds like a good call for folks to test this out, see how far and wide we can go with it, and let us know what you find out there. But that's kind of cool. That's exciting to actually get some GPU.
Any major Spark or Hadoop version bumps, or still at the?
I think maybe Spark 2.1.1. I know that's in the works. The major release 1.2 released Spark. Geez, that's confusing. 2.1 Spark minor bump there. Hadoop is still going to remain at 2.7.3 for now.
Okay, good to know.
Well, that's awesome. More regular releases are a good thing. And on that note, we can transfer over to the Juju release schedule. There was a nice email from the lead of the Juju engineering team to the Juju dev mailing list talking about the kind of expect your release schedule. And while work on 2.3 goes on, we have had point releases on top of 2.2, which was the last big release just a little bit ago. The team is aiming to put out a point release of 2.2 every 4 weeks right now to help make sure we get the bugs fixed up and address any issues that come up. And that the big release 2.3 will be the next big one coming as part of the cycle work. So that one will have a longer timeline on it. So if you're running the 2.2 or you get up to 2.2, make sure you keep an eye out for those part releases coming. And the first one of those, 2.2.1, was released while we were away between episodes here. And so make sure to grab that. It's got some good bug fixes for users. So I know that we're looking at getting all of Jazz updated, all the Jazz controllers updated, going to the point release as well. So go give that a test. And if you find any issues, be sure to file them up and look for those fixes in the upcoming point releases of Juju. All right, so main topic of the day. You guys ready for this? This is going to be mind-blowing fun today. I've been looking forward to this one for a while.
Can't wait.
All right.
All last night.
So this main topic I want to talk about is kind of a call for testing. I don't know if you all know, but Juju has the support for feature flags, where when we develop a feature, we develop it behind a feature flag so that it can be tested and developed on and iterated on. And sometimes features will span between releases because they're not quite baked yet. Feature flags really common software practice or whatnot. But this one is to do with cross-model relations. One of the most interesting things that Juju brings to the table is the idea of relating different applications so that they can communicate and collaborate, and you can express in the model a lot of information through those relations without having to manually manage a bunch of config file edits or synchronizing what the usernames and passwords of things are and all that. It all happens through the relation communication between applications, and it is really one of the key ideas that I always, whenever people are like, what makes Juju different? That's one of the first things you got to bring up, because it's just something that is really unique. So now this is great. You have a model and you have applications deployed in the model and you can relate them, and yay, that's awesome. You export that to a bundle and it stores all the relations and everything, and that's hunky-dory. But with this feature that's in development is allowing you to relate things across models. And there's several different scenarios where this is really useful. And so I think it's time for me to get my screen share on. All right. So you're gonna have to forgive me on this because I got greedy. Hello. I got very greedy trying to get my demo set up, and I put things in an error state right before we started, and I haven't had time to recover. So my bad. So ignore this MySQL follower. This was my getting greedy, but you can pay attention to this one, the MySQL 0 here. It's actually running, and what I've got here is a model just called prod in my controller crossing models on AWS. And I've got a MySQL deployed. I've got Munin, and Munin is watching over my MySQL and collecting back monitoring information. And the idea here is I have a production database model. Databases are great because you can have multiple actual databases inside of a server that's running. Postgres, MySQL, all that. You can basically create databases with different user accounts and then hand them out to everybody. And this is the role of the DB admin. This is a model that a DB admin might, for instance, manage. They don't really care about all the actual applications that are leveraging their database. They just want to keep an eye on their database and make sure it's working properly. Now that's great, but if you're going to have data, you need to put it in from somewhere. So let's go over, and I've got a blog model here, and the blog model, it's nice and simple. All it is a WordPress, and it's running. And what's interesting, you'll note that there's no message here about, please wait for a database to connect. And that's because you'll notice there's actually a relation down here. This database relation is fulfilled by a thing called the hosted MySQL here. And if you look up here, there's a new section in status above applications, which are SAS name. And basically what we've done is we've offered the DB admins managed MySQL database out to other users to leverage. So you can see that this is the admin user of this controller, the prod model that I showed you, and I offer this as hosted MySQL. So if I go to, what's my command here? It's Juju find-endpoints. What this is showing me is that someone in this controller has shared out a hosted MySQL endpoint that I can leverage and use in my models. And it's fulfilling the MySQL DB kind of relation interface. This is what I can relate to. So here I've got my WordPress blog. I've related it to someone else's MySQL, and WordPress is happy and running. And I'll show you that in a second in the browser, but I got to switch my share over for that. Well, that's great. I have a blog. I could have done that all in one thing, though. So let's go over to another model. And here I have the opposite of a blog, a wiki. Again, same thing. This wiki is related to the exact same MySQL instance running. It's happy and ready. It's all hunky-dory, and there is this relation here. And so what we've done is we've caused these things to work across. We're modeling relations across different models, which is honestly how most folks would really work in a scaled out large company, infrastructure. You manage complicated infrastructure in one place, and then you allow access to other teams and things for it, right? So this is one really good use case for the idea of kind of cross-model relations. And let me go switch just to do the old Rick isn't pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. Switch to my browser window here. So can you guys see I have, let's go here. So this is my MySQL that I blew up. What I wanted to do was to talk about, like, if I was going to manage MySQL for my company, I'd probably have a slave instance set up where I'd have replication going across from the leader to the follower and all that. And I wanted to try to build this up really fast, but I got too greedy too fast with the timeline here. But here we can see I've got, my wiki, which just sits here. Now the GUI hasn't been updated yet to represent relations across models. There has been some prototyping work to do that, but I don't have it here. But here you can see this WordPress instance. It's ready to go. I can give it a name and a password and start going. And here's the wiki instance. Again, they're all in different models. They're nice and organized. They have different permissions, different users. So, one user can be offering an endpoint out to other users to leverage and use in their own models. So it's very built into the Juju multi-user world. And the one restriction I've got right now is that this is all within one controller. Okay. Now, obviously, people will be like, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if I could take, this database that I manage and share it across to another controller on my MAS or on my other cloud or my, LexD or whatnot?" And that's not allowed right now. Really, there's nothing technically that this, we will get there, but the networking complexity of making sure that each endpoint can see each other properly is a little bit more than can be bitten off in the first pass on this. So this is in Juju 2.2, and I'll show you how to check this out. Back to my command line I go. This is how you do a feature flag. You export an environment variable. The variable is juju_dev_feature_flags. And you can have more than one of them. In this case, the flag is cross-model. So if I do that, you see I get this command, Juju offer, and I have help for it and everything. And if I export this without the flag, it goes, I don't know what the offer command is. So there you go. So that's one use case. What do you guys think?
I like it. Is there a list that has feature flags?
No, I filed a bug on the docs. I wish I'd been part of the docs thing on that this morning. We don't actually have a running list of known flags that are out there to be played with. And I think part of that is that, like most things, there's a time when this is very early and the team's using a flag internally. And then there's a time like right now where we're going to start asking folks to help do testing. Yeah. And so at this point, yeah, we really should have a page on this. And I'll work to see if I can get a kind of documentation page on things that are ready to be tested. And because really, I mean, you guys are going to, in order to do this, you're going to need some documentation around what's, how do I actually offer an endpoint out to other models? How do I then relate to it and refer to it? Now, that documentation, I used it to help put this demo together, and I'm going to use it to put a blog post together, and then we'll put some in beta documentation and notes out.
Yeah.
Here coming up.
Documentation. The next step is actually getting the documentation out there once it goes GA. So, even if it's really rough, just like beta, it'd be nice to be able to see if it's out there and how to start using it.
Definitely. I'll be working to get that out with the holiday weekend. I shortcut it all over the place, but we'll get that out. And I really want to put the call out to help test this. So that's one use case. There are other use cases for relating things across models. Let's go to another controller. Oop, helps if I put the S on there. So let's do switch crossing Prometheus. I can do it. Now, you may guess kind of what this is. Here I have a new controller crossing Prometheus with a few models in it. Got an engineering model, a marketing model, and a Prometheus model. So let's go to engineering. Switch engineering. What I did here, again, I just put a simple demo together where spelling status correct. What I really did here was I deployed the Ubuntu charm just to get a couple running machines. And I set up Telegraph, and Telegraph is a metrics collecting subordinate charm. It will pull information about the machine, be it memory, CPU info, and such, out of that machine and make it available to Prometheus. So I have two machines basically that the engineering team's using, and they're doing some work with it, and I'm going to monitor that. And then the marketing team, they also have two different machines that I manage and monitor, and I want to make sure that everything is running smoothly here, and Telegraph is reporting back to Prometheus. And then in the Prometheus, I related, let's see if I can go back and find the relate here. This one. So here you can see I related my Prometheus Grafana source endpoint to the admin user Prometheus model Grafana endpoint. And that's this endpoint right here. If we look, this Grafana endpoint here. And if we do the find endpoints, all right, see, there we go. I'm testing and I found a bug. That should work. All right, so the find endpoint should report back to Grafana endpoint. But what this is actually doing is I have 4 different Ubuntu machines and 2 different models. And now I can monitor them and send all that data into a single Grafana instance, which is fun because now, and here you can see the GUI for these models. So Ubuntu, Telegraph, and Prometheus. But here I have Grafana. Let's reload this, or actually don't reload, just refresh. Here you can see I've been tracking my memory usage of the 2 machines in the marketing model and the 2 machines in the engineering model. Been tracking their memory usage since I deployed this back, looks like about, I don't know, 2.5 hours ago or so. And so here you can see you might have, again, many users with different workloads, and you can get centralized management. Another example might be, collecting syslog data from a bunch of dispersed models into a single point for tracking and error detection and all that kind of such. So kind of handy, in a real scale out world here. What do you guys think?
Very handy, and I like your page that you had here. Also, don't you have a page on how to set this up for controllers?
I have a question.
Sorry, Kevin, you're getting real choppy and bad for us.
Question for you. This is
Kevin muted himself. All right, so one by one, okay. So Antonio, I have a post I'd done in the past where I talked about using Telegraph and Prometheus to collect metrics of a controller itself. so that, obviously Juju controllers are part of your production infrastructure, and you should monitor them and watch them for signs of issues and all that. So there's a blog post which I can toss in the show notes on how that's done. We're actually working on a tutorial right now on the recommended pattern for doing that in production with HA controllers. And so look for that tutorial here in the next week. I've been working together with a member of the Juju core engineering team. The last couple of Juju releases have added some additional metrics you can pull that I didn't have available in my original blog post that I did on this. So we're going to update it in the tutorial. This was just something I could think of to demo it, but this is more about tracking the things in the models, right? So you might see that if I ran an OpenStack and I wanted to, maybe I run a couple different OpenStacks on my MAS hardware for different teams, but I want to centrally monitor how are those things performing and doing. Are the Nova instances, capping out their memory use? Or are they over committed too much or not? Across different OpenStacks, I could track it in this manner, right? Let's see. I could also do things like if I had something that processed data and I want to track how much data was going through different teams' deployments of some process, I could centrally collect that information and monitor it in a nice dashboardy way. Again, because it's all Juju underneath, I didn't have to go in anywhere and manually copy and paste IP addresses or MAC addresses or anything to help enable this to set up properly. I can actually model all this just the way it is. This thing should be communicating with that thing, and whatever they need to do to make that work, they need to do between them, right? So I guess there's stuff you could do with more manual work and with more copying and pasting, but this way it's all in the model, which is a kind of neat idea.
And is there a general, like, the way you set it up, is there a general way to just get basic data off of like memory, CPU usage off any application? Is that the thought here? Or is it kind of tuned to a SQL?
No, this is just off of an Ubuntu instance. So Telegraph just watches the hardware, right? I could have put Telegraph on any application out there running. You relate it to it, and whatever machine that application is running on will get hardware metrics coming out of it from Telegraph. Maybe your application spits out Prometheus data in, about how many requests per second or whatnot it's processing or handling. It could do the same thing,
But you could start here. Is that what I'm saying? Is easily just have your application be stock and just add
definitely
after you get info, I think, right? And just
And so I'll after what I'll do tomorrow is I'll take all the stuff that I've done to prepare for this the show. I'll turn it into a blog post and I'll put that up. I'll have some link to the initial documentation to how to walk through and put these two demos together yourself. See how they work. Basically, it's you put on the feature flag, you deploy something you want to expose or offer out for other models. There's a Juju offer command that you use. And then from there, it's normal Juju. You relate to the offered endpoint and you're good. You can use grant to change permissions on who's allowed to access an endpoint. So I can say, this is offered only to Antonio in my controller. And that helps, your normal basic ACL bits, just like you would any other model within Juju. So kind of common base there.
Very cool.
So the big thing is test it. Try out the feature flag. Play with it. What would you use it for? Let us know what you would use it for. Drop some notes in the comments or add some questions onto the Juju mailing list. Let us know what you would kind of like to see, how you'd like to see this move forward, and try it out. Let us know how it's working for you. And as we get the new notes and stuff out, I'll put notes in the Juju mailing list with the links to this. We'll have the blog post. So keep an eye out for the upcoming news. And I think our goal is to have this work within a single controller in the 2.3 release. So we've got a little bit of time to test on it, bang on it, make sure it's solid before we get it out of a feature flag in the 2.3 release. Cool. All righty. That's all I got to show for today. So I leave you all till next time, and happy Jujuing.
Thanks, Rick.